Okay. Hi, everybody. So today we are going to continue talking about farming, but we're kind of going to get into the more nitty-gritty stuff. And of course, we have Carla here, and then we have Bill Davison as a special guest. He has a wealth of knowledge, and I'm really excited to let everybody get going. So let me shut my mouth and let you guys go.
Okay, thanks, Blair. I want to remind anybody who's watching on Facebook to maybe share it or start a watch party so we can get some more people involved in this conversation about farming diversification and sustainability. Um, and I think I really started just as a resident of McLean County. I started thinking about the need for diversification and climate mitigation when we had a really long wet season and planting was delayed, and then the crops in the fall, you know, they weren't as healthy as they should have been, and it really got me thinking we've got to make some changes, because all we see for the most part is corn and soybeans. So we've got to do something different. And after I started running for office, I had a couple of my interns do some really great work for me. So shout out to Kevin Troy, who sent tons of emails until he found somebody to help educate me on these issues, and Jenny Lee from Illinois Wesleyan, and I found Bill Davison, who I actually know from the community a little bit, and uh, I wanted to learn about ways to make healthy changes for the success of our farmers and the best use of our land. And thank you so much, Bill. He's from the Savanna Institute. Go ahead and tell us, Bill, what the Savanna Institute is and what you do there.
The Savanna Institute is a nonprofit organization based out of Madison, Wisconsin, and we have 12 employees. And the focus of our work is on agroforestry. So we are working to help increase the scale and viability of agroforestry on farms across the Midwest. So some of our primary crops that we focus on are tree crops like chestnut trees, hazelnut shrubs, elderberries, black currants, those type of
Mm,
tree crops. And then you can grow those, and then you have alleys between them, so you can do what we call alley cropping and grow grains or have pasture between the trees as they grow. Farmers can also enroll those alleys in set-aside programs, so conservation reserve program, riparian buffer type programs. There's lots of options around that kind of thing. So we have
okay.
demonstration farms across central Illinois, up into northern Illinois and into Wisconsin. So we have 4 farms where we planted different versions of this, different models of trees and different types of soil and topography. So
Hmm.
they will be functioning as where we take people for field days, basically to show them the practices. We also
Okay.
have, oh,
Oh,
yeah.
I wanted to say, so these aren't family farms that have agreed to participate, or is that or it's land that is being used specifically for this experimentation.
One of the farms is owned by University of Illinois, so that's an alley cropping demonstration at Allerton
Hmm.
Park. The
Hmm.
others are, yeah, privately owned, and then we work in partnership with them.
Okay, okay, thanks for that.
And
Uh,
then
yeah, go
we
ahead.
also have a home farm we're buying in Wisconsin, and then we're setting up for-profit businesses. So we're really moving to scale up the whole system.
Okay. Um, so one thing I wanted to ask about the tree crops is do those fare a little bit better if you have a prolonged wet season in the spring, because the trees are already established, does that affect them at all if they end up in standing water?
It can. So we typically are looking for high and dry locations, some slopes, with the exception of crops like elderberries and willows. There are some plants that will tolerate wet soil. The nice thing about the perennials is you don't have to disturb the soil. So there's typically a grass cover around them.
Mm-hmm.
So that will take up some moisture. And then you have time to think through how water moves across your land, and you can work to minimize that problem.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you still have to be aware of water, and sometimes fields will get tiled before you plant trees because chestnuts don't like wet soil, so you have to be careful about that.
Okay. And you said there were some farms with University of Illinois. Are there any actually in McLean County that you're working with?
No, they're in at Allerton Park, and then there's one in Hannah City just west of Peoria,
Okay.
and then one's up by Rockford.
All right. So not too far away, but not actually in my legislative district. But that's something that we could that hopefully we can get some more people interested in. So then another thing that I've been learning a little bit more about is cover crops. And I don't know if you have any experience in encouraging farmers to use cover crops and what kind of cover crops there are.
Yeah, the main challenge with cover crops is that in a corn and soybean rotation, there's not a lot of room for them.
Mm-hmm.
So really, the biggest barrier is adding a third crop. So if farmers would grow a small grain, like say wheat, rye, something like that, then they have space to establish red clover as a cover crop or another type of clover.
Oh, I
And
see.
so that three crop rotation gives you space, and then you can pretty easily add a cover crop, which helps you give your soil a break and
Mm-hmm.
rebuild the health of the soil.
Right. So when we say diversification, that's what we're talking about, right? Where you, instead of just one crop every year and nothing else, you try and fit at least two, if not three, within a calendar year.
Yeah, but that's just a baby step. So I've moved beyond that. So we're going to tree crops because that's the ultimate solution. Because the fundamental reason our current system is unsustainable and broken is that we use large-scale monocultures of annual crops, which
Mm-hmm.
requires constant tillage and large
Mm-hmm.
applications of pesticides and insecticides and herbicides.
Right, right. I know of a situation in Tazewell County where someone's small crop was affected by chemical drift. So that's another thing. That's another thing to think about with the big farms is the impact that they have on other people who are trying to do different things and healthier things. So the one thing that this pandemic definitely brought to light is how important it is to have food sources that are local. And I was really interested when we were talking on the phone a few weeks ago about the acreage needed to feed people.
Yeah, that's there's a really interesting some data from a paper I saw about a year ago, and they basically modeled the whole country, and they looked at the potential for local farmland to feed people, and they specifically mentioned Chicago, and that's what got my attention because
Mm-hmm.
the problematic parts of the country are like New York City and Los Angeles, where it is harder for them, but here in the Midwest, we're fortunate. We have good soil and climate.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what really surprised me. Everyone in Chicago could be fed by food grown within 50 miles of Chicago. And if you look at the whole state of Illinois, it drops down to something like 10 miles. So
Mm-hmm.
basically within the county you live in, all the food could be grown to feed everyone.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right, I'm going to show, so if I show those maps that you, oh, I need to, hold on, I need to go back to share screen. Oh, let me get it ready. So you sent me two maps, and should I show the big one first, like the 300,000 one first?
Sure.
Okay. All right. I'll see if I can, let me get that open and then share screen. Okay. There we go. Okay. So what are we looking at here?
So what we're looking at here, the red is an outline of McLean County,
Mm-hmm.
which is 759,000 acres of land. And then the gray box in the middle, 343,000, represents the amount of land it would take to feed every resident of the county. So there's 171,000 people that live in McLean County.
Okay.
And this assumes our standard diet, which is meat heavy. So
Mm-hmm.
it takes something like 2 acres per person. And so this is just a graphic representation to show that we could feed everyone in the county and still have half of the land left for other uses.
Right. And then here's the second one. So tell us what this means.
So this one, this is interesting because this is if every resident adopted a plant-based diet.
Mm-hmm.
Does not mean vegetarian necessarily. It just means that you eat more fruits and vegetables and less meat. So it shows you that meat really is land and resource intensive. So if we ate more plants and if we grew on this acreage, we'd have higher quality food that would taste better. It'd be easier for people to eat vegetables. They'd be more fresh. So we could feed everyone on that amount of land under a ideal scenario.
That's amazing. So that gets me thinking about the sort of like the corporate farms, the really big farms, and how much acreage could each of them set aside to maybe start growing some grains, some vegetables? Is that something that you've looked at?
Yeah, we have different programs, different ways of working with families. So one of the main reasons that a large farm might think about this is it's a way to bring young people back to the farm. So if you have kids or grandkids that want to work on the farm, you can create enterprises that they can take over and manage within the larger farm. So you can carry on with your grain operation, and you can add trees, shrubs, livestock, or some combination of them.
Mm-hmm.
There's shelter belt programs. There's riparian buffer programs where you get cost share to establish some of these plants. And it is also possible you can plant an orchard, enroll it in the conservation reserve program, and just apply it to the alleys. So your trees are outside of that set aside. So you get payments based on the alleys and you get to manage your trees. So it's a way to cover your expenses. For a lot of the crops that we work with, there's 2 to 6 years of time where you're just growing the tree or shrub before you get your yield. So that's one of the main barriers, but that's where set aside or alley cropping or having livestock between the trees is a way to mitigate that challenge.
Okay. And did I hear correctly that the Savanna Institute will actually work with farmers to help them get these things started? Is this a service that you provide?
We do work with landowners. Yeah, we can visit farms. We have a lot of information on our website. We have a lot of partners with other expertise. So yeah, we can connect people with a network of other farmers that have already done this, so they can speak to lessons they learned, and then we have a lot of resources that can help.
Mm-hmm. Great, great. Um, right. So I wanted to hear about some of the grains that we actually do have some farmers in the southern McLean County that are actually growing grains that you can buy at like our local co-op. So what are some of the grains that we eat that our farmers are growing?
Well, you can eat corn. That was
Yeah, but
one of
we
them.
don't eat. I mean, other than the sweet corn, we don't really
Yeah, we don't
like
eat our
like the
field.
giant fields that we see. We're not. That's not for us, is it?
No, our field corn goes to livestock and cars for
Hmm.
ethanol for the most
Hmm.
part. However, corn is a remarkable plant. It could be a direct source of human food. It has been for something like 9,000 years. I
Hmm.
bred
Hmm.
corn specifically for that purpose.
Hmm.
So it's an amazing plant. It's really good. So corn could be an amazing source of food, but probably the more realistic plant to start with is wheat. So
Hmm.
farmers are growing wheat in and around McLean County. Warthog is one of the varieties, so we can grow hard wheat here.
Hmm.
People thought we couldn't, but we've been doing it for 8 years now or
Hmm.
more. Um, the reason hard wheat is important is that's what you make bread with. So
Hmm.
soft wheat is the commodity wheat for Illinois, and that's for pastries and that
Hmm.
kind of thing. But we can grow soft wheat, hard wheat, blend them together, make bread, flour for bread. So we have a mill that opened in Ashcombe, Illinois, so
Hmm.
east of here, and they've been really successful. So they grow a bunch of different grains, and they mill it into flour, and they ship it all over the country and make deliveries to Chicago, St. Louis, Indianapolis, and they've created a local food system around grains.
That's great. Um, so again, if a farmer was interested in diversifying and maybe growing some buckwheat or some what you called it hard wheat,
Hmm.
uh, and I've actually bought that to make Irish brown bread, which is delicious. So if they wanted to get into that, is that something that the Savanna Institute could help help a farmer with, that kind of diversification?
That's a little bit outside of our area. We would refer them to groups like the Artisan Grain Collaborative,
Oh, sure. Mhm.
which focuses on grain. There's organic farming groups in Illinois. There's lots of resources. I mean, grain is the easy thing.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of resources around that. But yeah, if they can grow food grade wheat. So I know a lot of farmers would probably think the reason I don't grow wheat is because I can't make money on wheat.
Mhm.
However, if you grow food grade and if you can grow organic food grade, you can make money on wheat. So that's a niche in the marketplace and
Mhm.
an opportunity.
Yeah. Great. Um, I I do want to ask Blair to drop in the chat, and perhaps also on the Facebook Live, the two links. We've got a community document, just kind of laying out in fairly simple terms the economics of large commodity crops versus diversity farming and feeding local people. And what I want to say about that is that the giant cornfields that we see generally, like you said, they goes to fuel and animal feed. That's mostly what they do. So the farmer sells that and it goes somewhere else. But if you've got tree crops fruits, vegetables, those stay in the economic cycle of our community, and they end up being more valuable to us when the food that is grown stays here. So the two documents, like the second one, the economics of local food systems, it's like 123 pages. So we're not going to look at it tonight, but if anybody's interested in that, I would encourage them to take a look. Blair, do we have any questions or comments on the Facebook Live?
At this point, we do not. We did have Justin from the union reach out and say hi to everybody, though.
Okay.
He's watching.
Great. I was hoping I had invited a bunch of farmers. It's entirely possible that they're tired and chilling out and doing other things. I see we have somebody on the phone, but I don't know how. I'm not sure we can hear from somebody who's just calling in. Bill, did you have any other things that you wanted to share?
Well, the main focus of my work is around chestnut trees, which I realize probably not the first thing that comes to mind when people think about food here, but
Right.
It's a remarkable tree. It's got a lot of potential. It is being grown across the Midwest, and the nice thing about chestnut trees, and I think farmers will appreciate this, there's a large unmet demand for the crop, and there's no foreseeable end to that given
Okay.
the perennial nature and the time frame for growing the trees.
Mm-hmm.
And 10 acres of chestnuts can support a family. So for people that have a lot of acreage and want their kids to come back to the farm, a chestnut orchard is a way to do that. And so that's the main focus of my work, is
Right.
trying to help people understand that and help them get started. And chestnuts like well-drained soil. So the sandy soil along the Illinois River and Tazewell County,
Mm-hmm.
Mason County, over in there is ideally suited to chestnuts. So if we can
Right.
get started, and I think when people see them growing, they'll realize that you can grow corn on trees, basically.
Right. Right. So how many years does it take to get chestnut trees to the point where they're producing?
They start 4 to 5 years after planting, but it really takes more like 7 or 8 to enter into commercial production, and then they basically increase every year from 7 to 8 years up through 30. So once you get at around 10 years, you get commercial production, and you can start generating a profit. So that's the challenge, is how you cover that initial time span.
Right. Right. And how many acres did you say would does it take to make it profitable for a family farm?
10 acres is enough for a middle class income for a family.
Right. Right. And for those of us who are less familiar with what 10 acres looks like, how does 10 acres fit into those like those county road squares that you see on the map?
Yeah, the squares are well, like a square mile, 640 acres in a square mile. So an acre is about 200 feet by 200 feet.
Okay. Yeah, so that's really not very much space to set aside for a really valuable long-term investment. That's so funny. We were talking about that when we set up our screens. Zoom Live. All right. Do we have any questions or comments?
We actually have a
Yay.
couple of questions from
Awesome.
Joyce. Thank you.
Awesome.
And she said, she wanted comments from Bill on what the crop diversification could do to help wildlife, like monarch butterflies
Oh,
as their
yes.
populations are crashing. And then she also wanted comments on the impacts of climate change for crops locally. What will happen to commercial big ag with reliance on monocropping as we have more extreme weather events happening? So awesome questions. Thank you,
Yeah,
Joyce.
thanks, Joyce.
Yeah, the nice thing about agroforestry is that it allows you to establish perennial cover. So you can have like a hayfield type vegetation between the trees, which has clover and can have different flowers in it. You can intentionally plant pollinator strips that have more diversity, but just going from annuals and bare soil to perennial is a improvement for the insects. And then if you can add flowers, it's even better. And then in terms of climate change, yeah, the system we have now is fragile because it's, you know, dependent on planting large acreages of the same crop. So there's a lot of work to be done at once. And once you cover the soil with perennial plants, then it's a lot easier to deal with extreme weather.
Right. Thanks. Does that answer Joyce's questions?
I think it answered most of it. The commercial big ag question, though, I don't know if it did. The reliance on monocropping. You may have, and I just missed it, but.
Yeah, just pointing out that, you know, if your whole income is based on one single crop, a monocropping, and that fails due to either a drought or way too much rain, then, you know, then you just have to hope you have to have enough insurance to pay for that loss. And that is another, you know, that reminds me that crop insurance, and we talked about this a little bit with George Petrelli a few weeks ago, that the government crop insurance that is available is currently geared for the large commodity crops, you know, for the corn and soybeans that we see miles and miles of here, and not really so much for the smaller farms. However, if you have enough diversification, then you know, presumably, if you're going to have insurance, it can be scaled down for those kind of crops. Bill, have you ever dealt with or looked into the insurance aspect of you know, introducing tree crops?
Yeah, we work on that issue. We advise around the Farm Bill and trying to shift USDA priorities to be more supportive, because right now most of the subsidies and insurance goes to support the main commodity crops. So it's the safest thing to do, and it's a safety net basically. So we are working on trying to level the playing field and get more resources for agroforestry in terms of research and demonstration and funding in general.
Yeah, that's great. Hopefully our members of Congress and our senators will be able to help us with that in the near future.
And then also, this is the question that just popped up. How will farmers that are doing the monocropping see the light? Like, what suggestions do you have about that on changing their ways? Do you have any suggestions, Bill, for what would be good talking points?
Well, the whole system is changing. It's been changing pretty rapidly for a couple of years, and now with the coronavirus impacts, it's accelerated the change. So it's much easier now to talk about local food, diversity, organic farming than it was 5 years ago. So to me, I don't think it's that hard. There's a lot of resources out there. There still is social pressure to maintain the status quo, but you can meet people in your county, probably not that far from you, that are diversifying. So Regenerate Illinois would be a good group to look into. They have a listserv. You can join the listserv. You can ask any question you have, and you'll get farmers, people like me, responding and making connections. So that's a really good way to begin. They have field days, so you can go to other farms and see what farmers are doing. You can pretty quickly become part of an alternative community and get the same kind of support that you probably have now on your farm. So there are ways to do it, but it is the biggest barrier, I think, is social. You know, it's peer pressure and not wanting to stand out, but things are bad and getting worse, and so people are under pressure to do something different. So I would just encourage them to reach out and start learning and try to be open to possibilities. It's not as daunting as it might seem once you start to look into it.
Right, right. So Regenerate Illinois was one, and then what was the organization that helped with growing the different? I think it was for the different grains, like the cereal, rye, and buckwheat.
Yeah, the Artisan Grain Collaborative.
Artisan Grain Collaborative, right? I'll make sure to get those in the Facebook Live chat so people can see them connected to this conversation.
And the name of the listserv is the Idea Farm Network. It's just a Google group you can join, and it's already populated with tons of questions, but you can ask new questions about farming and marketing.
Great. All right. Well, are there any more questions or comments on the Facebook Live?
Nope. That was super awesome and super thorough, so I think we are good.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us tonight, Bill, and having this conversation. I really appreciate your participation and your experience. Thank you.
You're welcome.